As we all know, the Falcon Heavy rocket from SpaceX is the most powerful in the world. It hasn't flown in 3 years, but now it's back and works just as well as before. Putting several satellites into orbit more than 36,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface was a huge success that went off without a hitch. We now have only one thing to say: congratulations, SpaceX! But how did they accomplish this kind of milestone? It's about time we reveal some secrets about the success of the Falcon Heavy. Welcome to Smarter Tech for all interesting, trending technology news, most especially SpaceX news. We keep you updated always, and without further ado, let's get started. SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket is currently one of a few active rockets that has successfully proved the ability to deliver satellites into geosynchronous orbit as a result of the success of the US Space Force's USSF-44 mission. More importantly, it is one of only 3 rockets in the US that can do that. And by the way, the Atlas V and Delta IV, the other 2 ULAs, will no longer be used by the US military after the end of 2023. This implies that the Falcon Heavy might be the only rocket in the world capable of launching certain US military missions until ULA's next-generation Vulcan rocket is ready to demonstrate its capabilities. The CEO of SpaceX tweeted that Falcon Heavy shows how awesome humanity is. The Falcon 9 rocket was carrying 54 Starlink internet satellites, continuing SpaceX deployments for a broadband network connecting rural homes, ships, commercial aircraft, and Ukrainian military forces in their conflict with Russia. The consumer-grade, high-speed, low-latency internet network of SpaceX will be expanded by the satellites on board the Falcon 9. Interestingly, more than 40 nations and territories presently allow subscribers to connect to the Starlink network, and Japan recently became the first Asian country to do so. Before we continue, hold up. If you're watching us for the first time, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you can enjoy our future videos while getting updated. Getting back to the topic, SpaceX revealed Starlink service for aircraft on Tuesday and prior products for homes, companies, RVs, boats, and ships. According to a tweet from SpaceX, they believe that with Starlink, travelers will have access to high-speed and low-latency internet from the time they walk on their plane. While most users must pay to access this network, since Russia's invasion of Ukraine began in February, SpaceX has offered the country's military and government free access to Starlink ground terminals and internet service. However, this week, CNN reported that last month, SpaceX wrote to the Pentagon stating that it could not continue supporting the Starlink service in Ukraine as it had since February. Since terrestrial internet and cell phone networks were destroyed or interfered with by Russian attacks, Ukraine's military has relied on the network to continue communications. On October 7th, Elon Musk tweeted that delivering the Starlink service in Ukraine has cost SpaceX $80 million and would eventually cost more than $100 million. According to Musk, around 11,000 of the 25,000 Starlink user terminals already delivered to Ukraine were funded by nations, organizations, and contributors other than the US Defense Department. According to Politico's Monday story, 2 anonymous US officials participating in the discussion said that the Pentagon is considering footing the bill for the Starlink satellite network in Ukraine. However, Starlink continues to lose money. Every precious company that attempted to build an LEO communications constellation ended up in bankruptcy because it was extraordinarily difficult to do. Will SpaceX continue funding Ukraine's data service, or will it give up? On the other hand, the US Space Force mission, which was called USSF-44 and was supposed to take off more than 2 years ago, finally got off the ground on November 1st, 2022 after long delays. By the middle of 2021, all of the equipment needed for SpaceX's first Falcon Heavy launch since June 2019, mostly 3 new first-stage boosters, had passed qualification tests and been sent to Florida in preparation for a launch in late 2021 or early 2022. But that start never happened. Most or all of USSF-44's payloads didn't come together until November 22nd. This meant that the next Falcon Heavy launch wouldn't happen for more than 40 months since almost every other payload assigned to the rocket during that time had major delays. Even so, on November 1st, Falcon Heavy took off for the 4th time and worked perfectly for the 9 minutes that the US Space Force let SpaceX webcast go on. Before separating from the central core upper stage and payload and heading back toward the Florida coast, the twin side boosters of the Falcon Heavy, which were both in flight for the first time, assisted in launching the rest of the rocket into orbit. They landed safely at SpaceX LZ-1 and LZ-2 landing zones less than 8 minutes after liftoff. Not having landing legs or grid fins, Falcon Heavies were made bigger on purpose. The center core or middle booster kept burning for another 90 seconds and didn't separate from the upper stage until it reached a speed of almost 4 kilometers per second, which was a new record for a SpaceX rocket booster. In the past, SpaceX has attempted to land the main booster of a Falcon Heavy rocket on one of its unmanned drone ships in the Atlantic. Instead, the core booster for this mission had to land and be reused later so that as much fuel as possible could be used for direct insertion into geostationary orbit, which is located about 22,000 miles above Earth. This was due to the mass and orbital requirements of USSF-44's payloads. The center core B-1066 was probably destroyed when it re-entered Earth's atmosphere at about 50% of orbital speed. On the other hand, the side boosters B-1064 and B-1065 will be quickly fixed up for a future US Space Force mission that SpaceX says could follow USSF-44 as soon as later this year, but this may be wrong. The next mission for SpaceX seems to be USSF-67, which could launch as early as January 2023 according to the US Space Systems Command and the most recent press release, unless the company has a secret contract to launch another USSF. Technically, USSF-44 and 67 will launch in the same US fiscal year but not in the same calendar year. USSF-44 is SpaceX's first direct geosynchronous launch. This means that Falcon Heavy will try to send cargo for the US military into a circular orbit called GEO. Geosynchronous means that a spacecraft's orbital speed is the same as Earth's rotational speed at that altitude. This makes it a popular place for communication satellites and Earth observation satellites that want to keep looking at the same part of the Earth. To facilitate the job of the rocket, the majority of GEO-bound satellites are launched into an elliptical geosynchronous or geostationary transfer orbit. The satellites would then maneuver around the ellipse using their power. On a direct-to-GEO launch, the rocket does almost all of the work. After the upper stage of LEO, Falcon Heavy reached a park-in orbit in low Earth orbit. It likely did a second burn to get to geosynchronous transfer orbit. Then the upper stage must coast uphill for about 5 or 6 hours while doing a complex dance of thermal management and tank pressure maintenance to keep all of its cryogenic liquid oxygen, or LOX, from turning into gas and all of its refined kerosene, or RP1, from freezing into a slush that can't be used. On that trip, from an altitude of about 300 kilometers to 36,000 kilometers, the upper stage must also survive passing through both of Earth's radiation belts and apogee. To get into a circular geosynchronous orbit, the Falcon S2 must fire up its Merlin vacuum engine for about a minute or two. The next action is to position the payload, which could take a few minutes or an hour. Before arriving at its final location, a cemetery orbit a few hundred kilometers above GEO, the upper stage of the Falcon must complete at least 1 or 2 more burns. Even though the Falcon 9 rocket is very strong, it can't hit all 9 of the reference orbits that the Department of Defense wants its launch providers to hit. So SpaceX is better positioned to bid on military launch contracts with Falcon Heavy. SpaceX's future Starship and Super Heavy booster will be able to reach all 9 orbits, but it will be years before it has the stable configuration that the government needs. Even so, it is on its way. Because of this, Todd Harrison, in charge of Metro Strategic Insights, says that the Falcon Heavy will likely have a short shelf life. Harrison said that the Falcon Heavy would no longer be needed once SpaceX's new Super Heavies have been used for a while and have a track record of showing national security customers. So we think its useful life might be less than 5 years, and it might only be able to launch a few times in that time. It is a beautiful sight when it does launch though, especially when those side boosters come back and land simultaneously. Anyway, it's great that the FH is back in action again. Congratulations, SpaceX, your engineers are awesome. So will this achievement last, or is it just a matter of time? Comment down below. Also, please leave a like and subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell for more amazing videos. Goodbye!